Struggling to design your objects and furniture in your interior spaces? My name is Dr. Craig Thomas, interior design practitioner, educator and mentor for over 30 years. In part 2 of this one-point perspective tutorial, I will teach you how to quickly and accurately draw all your objects and furniture into your interior space. This is the same technique that I have taught to thousands of students and the same technique that I've designed all my award-winning projects. This one-point perspective tutorial will enhance and transform your drawing skills so you can generate, develop and communicate your design ideas to reimagine the spaces that you want to inhabit. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, I recommend that you start there, as part 1 lays the foundation of all the skills that you will learn in part 2. Okay, let's get started drawing the objects into the interior space. Okay, welcome to part 2 of the one-point perspective tutorial. So in part 1 we drew the space out, and we did that through a whole kind of step-by-step procedure where we were using kind of horizon lines, eye lines, vanishing points, measuring points. We drew the back wall at a scale of 1 to 25, and that was 3 meters by 2.5 meters by 3 meters the depth. We then drew that just the basic kind of interior, so we got all our kind of meter grid and our vanishing point. The next thing we do now is put a sheet of paper over the top, so we keep that grid really kind of nice and clean, and we can kind of reuse that now and reuse it by putting a sheet of paper over the top, whether it's tracing paper or detail paper. And ultimately now what we'll do, we will draw the objects. So we can then not draw the grid, we can draw other kind of textures and stuff on the wall, but ultimately now we'll use that vanishing point now to draw all these objects in our interior space. Okay, so the first one we'll do, we'll draw a sink unit on this side here. So remembering now that we have this 1 meter, 2 meter, 3 meter grid to work with, and that is completely to scale at 1 to 25. So if I have a sink unit on this wall, and let's just say it's 800 millimeters off the floor, I can use my scale ruler at 1 to 25 and I can put a mark on that line, and now I know what height that is. So when I come from my vanishing point and draw that out, I know it's a consistent height of 800 from my floor. If I make this let's just say 600, so it's a very particular thing, this little unit that I've got on the wall. So if I draw a line and draw another line, and I'm just going to make this 250 millimeters deep. So I'm onto my scale again, just going to double check that where it comes. Yeah, that's perfect. So I can finish that line off, but you won't see that line, as you'll see in a second. But that, if I was drawing a section through, that is what that unit would look like. I want to take that out to my 2 meters. So I can just draw a light line. You won't see it because it's over the top of my my grid. But ultimately what I can do now, I can go from my vanishing point to that first line, kind of line it up like so. I can now do the same thing from the edge, and if where this line comes along and meets my 2 meter point, if I draw my line inwards, then you can see it meets this line. And if I can finish then off from my vanishing point to the bottom edge, like so, and draw a line up where it meets, like so, and then across and then finish that off like so. You will see I always have a piece of paper like this handy next to it. So there's my sink unit in space. So I'll just leave that there for a second, and what I will do now, I will split this in half. So I want half of it to be the sink and half of it to be a kind of drainer next to it. So what I can do is I can dimension this by, because I know it's going from 1 meter to 2 meters. So I could use this line here. So where this 1 meter line hits it, that's going to be absolutely bang on where I want it to be, halfway through. So that's 1 meter and that's 2 meters. Another way of doing it, that's the quickest way, but when you don't have something as obvious as that, you can draw a line across, and where they meet basically is the halfway point. So those two lines meet like that. So if you wanted to say go halfway between this, say this was a tile on the wall, you go halfway, and then at that point is bang the halfway. Same thing with this one. If you want to find the halfway point, diagonal from corner to corner, and where that is, perfect. Okay, so there's my kind of sink unit. So I can finish drawing this off now. What I'm doing here is drying the ink, so I don't want the ink to kind of, smudge basically, because when it's wet, you only need to move across it and it will completely smudge the whole thing. So what I've done now, I've drawn the sink, the edge around that sink. So it's, you could see I put a little dash from corner to corner, just so that I could get the thickness the way I kind of wanted it. And I tend to do these things in pencil, because when I've got them in pencil, then when I go pen, I can then adjust the thicknesses slightly if I'm not 100% happy with the pencil lines. I can then adjust them, going slightly inside or outside of my pencil line so I get my thicknesses perfect. So there's my sink unit kind of drawn into the perspective using my vanishing point. So all the lines are either coming from the vanishing point if they're coming out into space. All the vertical ones are vertical kind of lines, perfectly vertical, and horizontal lines then just kind of joining that up. So you can see that, you can look inside this. So this is a little kind of dry-in part of the sink here, but you can put kind of things in here, and then there's the kind of sink. So I can, when it's dry, I can just kind of quickly go along that and rub out some of those lines, but wait until it kind of dries. Try not to touch your page, because when you touch the page, what happens is you get kind of grease from your fingers, and then sometimes when you draw the lines, it doesn't take to the paper as well. Okay, so let's have a look next. So let's do a table next in this front space. So I'm going to go with pencil again. So I'm going to draw my table at 700 high. So again, I'm going to use my back wall. I'm going to use my 1 to 25 scale, and I'm going to go up 5, 6, 700, and I want it to be 200 or 20 millimeters, I should say, thick. So and I want it to be 1 meter wide, and I want it to be centered. So I can just quickly sketch it onto my back wall. So I know my sizes now are correct. I know it's 1 meter, so from 1 meter to 2 meters. So I can draw a light line up from both of those. And then what I can do from my vanishing point now, I can draw my line from the top of my table, vanishing point through there, come to the edge. And just so I want to see, get my thickness, I'm also going to do just on one side through that bottom line, and just put one little line underneath here, which has come from the underside here. So I've got the top line, but I've also got a little line here, so I know what my thickness is. On this side, I only need that top line. Okay, so I'm going to make this table basically 1 meter by 1 meter. So that's nice and easy for me. So I know exactly now at this point and at this point, I can draw a vertical line. And then where those two lines meet, I can draw a horizontal line. So the thickness of my tabletop from that little line I made. Like so. So I can draw that pencil line in there if I want to, if I take this earlier line out. So ultimately what I have there now is I have a box, a cube, not quite a cube because it's only 700 high, but you can see now where my kind of table is. So I could at this point pen my tabletop in, which I'm going to do. So there's my tabletop. So I'm going to do some square legs, just nice and simple for this. So I'm just going to agree a kind of dimension. So again, well, let's do the same as my tabletop. So a quick trick here is if I take my 45 and from, well, let's do from the bottom so it's easier to explain. If I go from that bottom corner and draw 45 line up, and I do the same on this side from that bottom line up, and then I draw a line down from where that 45 line meets the top of the tabletop. Then I've got the thickness of my kind of leg. So they're quite chunky, that's kind of fine. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to complete the rest of those legs. Okay, so there is my table drawn in that space. So the next thing I'm going to draw is a rug around that table, and I want the rug to go out to halfway into my space, so 1.5, which is the halfway point, and I wanted then just to come straight back to the edge. So you can see I've moved my table slightly away from the edge here because I want it to sit on something, which is this rug. So let's investigate how we can get to that kind of center point. So because there's so much stuff in the way here, I'm going to do it on this middle square here, which is basically the kind of, the halfway point. So 1 meter each way. So we want to find the halfway point through here. So it's as quick as just literally going from corner to corner. So from corner to corner, and now from corner to corner. And basically that is the halfway point. So that drawn then from that point down, and then we can come across then from that point with a light line, and that is how far my rug is going out. So from our wall here to the edge of that rug is 1.5 meters, which is also 1.5 meters away from my back wall. So what we need to do now, I want my rug to be 1/2 meter from this wall and 1/2 meter from this wall. So basically it's a rug that is 2 meters. So I got a couple of ways of how to do that. I've got my back wall, which I know is 3 meters using my scale. So what I could do exactly what I've just said there. So I could come back in 5, and I could come back in 5, make 2 marks on my what was my finished floor level, if you like, and then I can go from the vanishing point like so. Another way of doing it would be to go from edge, 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 edge to get that exactly the same. So I tend to go to the back wall with these things, but I mean, there's no hard and fast rules for me. I just kind of, whatever kind of fits really. So there it is. I know that's 1/2 meter from that because I've measured it here. So I can do the same thing from this side. So I'm just showing you a couple of different ways of how to do it, because sometimes if there's lots of stuff in the way, then the one way is better than the other way. So there's my rug. So if I lift that rug directly underneath where my table is, like so, you'll see that there's my rug. So I can now draw that in. So there's my rug. I've also now drawn with a 1.2, so quite a thick pen with my bottom line in. So the interior starts to take a bit more shape when I start to do that. You notice when I was drawing this line, I didn't go straight through. I stopped it because this leg and this leg is in front of the back of the rug, because these legs are sat on it. So basically it starts to, this is when the 3 dimensions really start to kind of snap into place, where you see the rug now is, obviously on the floor because the legs are in kind of front of it. So next thing I will do now, I will start to add a window on this side. So I'll leave this up so you can get a kind of sense in here, and I will make this window so it's 1/2 meter back and 1/2 meter back. Okay, so same thing, and I'm going to make the window 1 meter and up to 2 meters. So we're going to do something slightly different on this one. I'm going to make it so it's 250 millimeters away from this wall back. So you'll see how you can do this technique twice. So I've now created 2 kind of vertical lines. This one is 250 millimeters back. So what I did, I found the halfway point. So 500 millimeters, 500 millimeters, or half a meter, and then I split that in two, and now I know that that's 250 millimeters and that's 750 millimeters back. So I'm going to create the rest of that window. So for the thickness of my actual wall of my outside, so I can either guess it, which would be perfectly fine, to be honest. You know, you don't have to, you know, this is not meant to be 100% accurate. It's completely fine. But if you wanted to make it more accurate, then on your line coming through here, if you, because you know this is to scale, say our wall thickness to our piece of kind of architecture was, let's say, 200 millimeters, then I can use my 200 millimeters here, run along that line, and so if I draw my line out, I get a point. And what I can do then from my vanishing point, I can draw my line like so, and then draw my internal line to meet it. And there is my window. So I know I've got no other objects in there, so I will now start to fill in some of the walls. So you will see this start to come to life a bit more on this one side. So now we can begin to see the kind of full interior now starting to kind of take shape as I've got most of my stuff drawn here. So if I'm going to make another window on this side, and I'm going to make this particular window 750 millimeters back from this side and 750 millimeters back, so it's a 1.5, and I can do this directly off my wall behind. So my window itself then I know is 1.5, and I'm going to make it the same height as this one. Now on this particular one, I'm not going to worry too much about getting the depth completely accurate on it, and you'll see that it's completely fine. You just get used to kind of guesstimating how deep this wall should be and how it should look. So I'm going to show it that deep, and then I'm going to go from the vanishing point from the corners. So vanishing point to all the corners. And if I move this up now, you can see where my lines are. And this is why I use pencil for these ones, so you can see that this side is slightly thicker than this one, and that's kind of just the way it works when you're working with these kind of drawings. You only need to be a fraction of a millimeter out of one line, and you get something to look slightly thicker when we started to do this one over here. So then I can see that this one's slightly thinner than that one. So when I draw, I will now draw slightly on the outside of this one, slightly on the outside of that one, and then it should work out. So there's my window. So I will now put a door on, so I'll construct a door. So I want my door to be the whole of that kind of meter that is left. And I want the door to be kind of open, and I want it to be 2 meters tall. So I can draw a line out at this point. I can draw a line out underneath here. And I know it's going to be about, well, let's not make it a meter. Let's make it so it doesn't cover this window. So I'm going to make it 700. So it's almost like a caravan door. So there's my door in the distance. But what I want to do, I want to do a couple of things now. I want to draw a skylight up above here, and I want to draw a unit on this side and a tiny little kind of unit on this side. So this one will be like a kind of, you know, if you were drawing it and it's like made out of glass. I'm going to draw this one quickly, and I just want to show you what that is going to kind of look like basically. So that is it, like a kind of glass cabinet, if you like, made out of a series of glass sheets so you can actually see through it. And I've done it in a lighter pen, a 0.1. So we'll rub those pencil lines off underneath that. So the last thing I'm going to do in terms of furniture is I'm going to make a shelving unit here, which I want to be 2 meters deep, and I want it to be configured slightly differently in the two kind of components. And I'm actually going to take it right up to the ceiling, so it's kind of full height, and I'm going to make it 300 deep. So I'm going to draw it here, and I'm going to put the line all the way up to the ceiling. So if I was drawing it on my section effectively, it kind of looks like that. If I finish that last line off there. So that's my kind of unit. So I'm going to draw that in next. Okay, and the final thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show a roof light up the top, and I'm going to make it from the 1 meter, 1.5 meters, so I can do my little trick. There's my 1.5 meters, and I'm going to do it 1.5 meters this way as well. So again, I've got my two options. I can either do that, or as I know my back wall is to scale 1:25, I can come over 0.5 meter. So there's my two lines. The other two lines are perfectly onto my grid, so I'm going to draw those in next. And again, with the thickness, I'm just going to guesstimate this. So I'm going to draw my two vertical lines from those edges up, and I'm just going to kind of roughly guesstimate what that would be. Nobody's going to measure off this. A 1-point perspective is effectively a kind of simulation of the space. It's not as we see, it's really a simplified version of how we see. And nobody's ever going to mention, is this not to scale? Nobody's ever going to mention kind of, you didn't get that 1 millimeter within a certain tolerance. Nobody ever measures off a 1-point perspective. Okay, and so there it is. So I'll just spend 10 minutes probably gently making sure the thing's dry first, taking a rubber and rubbing all those kind of pencil lines off, and then I may thicken some lines up using in the way that I thicken them up on the edge, so certain things kind of stand out. So there's my 1-point perspective. Yep, so everything's kind of drawn. I've got my kind of windows and my roof light, my various bits of furniture, and I've got my kind of space correct. So what I'll probably do now, just to finish it off, I will draw some slightly thicker lines in places, just to give it a little bit more kind of 3D. Okay, so that just makes things stand out more. So basically my technique here is to, if there's a plane like this one where there's something behind it, to draw the outer line. Same thing with this one here, to draw the outer line, to draw the outer line here, the outer line right the way around that table, so the table gets a bit more self-contained, an object that sat in front of something else, like that door, the outer edges in here. I didn't do this bottom one, it's the only one I missed. And also the two inside lip of the sink there and there, and the underside and that one, just to show that there's something going in there and over the top. I didn't do the glass one, I've kind of left that as it was, and I did the same thing with the window. So the inside, 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 and the inside of that one there. It just makes it, it's very subtle, but it makes a big kind of difference really. And you know, you can continue with that and you can start to add textures. So that's the end of part 2. So basically what we're going to do next for part 3 is going to add materials and textures.